hello once again, my friend. Hello, I am your host, Attorney Shaune Arnold, reminding you to maximize your competence to get the confidence you need to succeed. Let me tell you what we're doing here at Legal Biz Cafe. It is my hope, it is my passion to help you kick your boss to the curb. So that is why we are here, folks. I invite you to call me. This is a new show, and we're finding our traction, but I see that we are having listeners, and so you can also find me on Facebook at Shaune.Arnold. You can find me on Twitter, Shaune.Arnold, LinkedIn as well, same thing, Shaune.Arnold. I am not hard to find. If you absolutely must speak to me in person, call me at 213-718-3468. I look forward to talking to you about your business. So today, I actually want to talk to you about capital compliance. Now, what do I mean by capital compliance? And what can you do with it once you understand what it is? You know, it's funny, the meaning of capital compliance, that is a term of art. Although you will, once you know what it is, then you find that the term of art is very descriptive. But the first time I heard it, I wasn't quite sure what was meant by capital compliance. I just knew that it had to do with the Securities Exchange Commission. And 3 years ago, I was in a car accident where the car I was in was T-boned on the passenger side at about 55, 60 miles an hour. Oh, yeah, and I was sitting in the passenger seat at the time. And needless to say, I am very lucky to be alive and knowing my name, walking, talking, all of that good stuff. But when the accident first happened, I was curled up in bed for several months, and I was literally unable to move. One of the first things that I did when I was able to get up was go to a place called CEO Space. And a girlfriend of mine, CEO Space happens at Lake Las Vegas in Nevada, just outside of Las Vegas, in actually Henderson, Nevada. And a girlfriend of mine put me up, and she wanted to know about the capital compliance classes. And because she was putting me up, I really wanted to get that information for her because she was traveling behind and not able to be there. So the morning, I left work at like 5 o'clock on Friday, got there at midnight. Now, mind you, I had just gotten out of bed from this horrible car accident. When I woke up the next morning, I wasn't able to move. I had to spend the entire day in bed, and so I was then frantic about finding out what capital compliance is and what it has to do with the SEC. So I went to all the classes that I could find that week at CEO Space that had anything to do with securities or investments or the SEC, anything that I could come in contact with. And I came across these classes that were talking about private placement memorandums. And a private placement memorandum, I know because I've been practicing business law and securities law for these many years. A private placement memorandum is basically a business plan on steroids. It has risk disclosure language and legal disclaimer language that passes muster with all the various states that you're going to be offering your securities in, and those are called blue sky laws. And the disclaimer language also satisfies the Securities Exchange Commission requirements. And I heard them talking about how the purpose of the private placement memorandum is to substitute for the formal prospectus that you would have to file and other documentation that you would have to file if you were if you were offering your securities to the public and not to just a very private group of individuals like you do in a private placement. And so I thought all of this rather redundant, and I thought, okay, private placement memorandum, okay, get past that. I've got that in my computer. Get to being capital compliant. And then I went to other classes, and they talked about having a subscription agreement. And a subscription agreement is a CYA, cover your assets document that the business owner creates in conjunction with the private placement memorandum. And it is a questionnaire that's filled out by the investor stating that they make a certain amount of money and they're not giving you their last dollar, that they are a sophisticated investor, and it contains a lot of the same disclaimer, risk disclosure language and legal disclaimer language that you'll find inside the PPM. And so it kind of dovetails with the PPM. And I thought, okay, I've got 6 of those in my computer. Get to being capital compliant. And then I heard the person say, and once you have your business plan complete and you wrap it nicely within a private placement memorandum and you have a subscription agreement that you give to your investors, you are capital compliant. And I sat there for a minute thinking, it can't be that easy. And then it dawned on me, yes, it can be that easy. It can be that simple. I was trying to make it difficult, and it just wasn't that hard. Capital compliance is all about not running afoul of the SEC. Capital compliance is about making sure that if you are approaching investors that you don't know, that you have documentation in place that's going to satisfy the SEC that you are offering your securities within certain guidelines. And so ultimately it's a protection for investors to say that the SEC has not looked at your securities in any way, but that you have made certain risk disclosures and that you have made certain legal disclaimers that are required by the SEC in order to make that private placement of those securities with someone that you don't know. So that is being capital compliant. Now, what do you do with that? What does that mean? What does it mean once you're capital compliant and you have your private placement memorandum and you have your subscription agreement and you're ready to go? What is it? What do you do with that? Well, I'd like to tell you about a client of mine who I'll call Jack. And Jack was thinking outside the box with respect to how to actually deal in the marketplace with his securities. And I thought it was just so clever that I'd like to share it with you. Because many of my clients ask me over the years how they can best bring investors into their companies. And as a threshold matter, I have this capital compliance conversation with them and make sure that they understand the importance of following the SEC registration exemption guidelines for approaching investors and offering those investors stocks or membership interests or other securities in a business. So the SEC's regulations do allow for a very small amount of carefully considered creative financing in the public offering space. And this creative financing opportunity recently presented itself for my client, and it worked wonders for my client, Jack. And Jack is the owner of a small privately held information technology firm. And so I'm going to tell you what Jack did with his securities. You see, Jack had been struggling for some time, looking for an investor, and he was looking for the investor to infuse as much capital as he could get into his business to help him complete the development of some new innovative technology. And the challenge that Jack was having was that his company was an unknown entity in the marketplace, so that the banks would not give him loans, and individual investors didn't want to take that chance either, while the banking markets were in deep distress. This was a couple of years ago. And so Jack met a potential investor with a deep pocket at a networking event, and he came to me to help him figure out a way to do business with this investor. And so I'm going to tell you what I showed Jack. Jack, the potential investor, and I sat down with an underwriter, and we devised what's called a reverse IPO. Now, what is a reverse IPO? In this particular situation, Jack's young, vibrant company that held innovative technology was going to merge with a publicly traded technology company that formerly enjoyed a stellar reputation in the marketplace, but which had been swept overboard during the dot-com bust of the late 1990s. That company went from being heavily traded on the New York Stock Exchange during the dot-com boom to being nearly barely traded on the over-the-counter markets, commonly known as a penny stock, traded on the pink sheets after all of the deals came crashing down. So Jack sold his company, new technology and all, to this newly formed corporation, and the ailing public company that we found for him did the same. And the new corporation was then infused with the investors' cash and cash from a bevy of additional investors. And in this way, life was breathed into the newly resulting company, and the two old companies each ceased to exist entirely. The investors each then purchased blocks of stock in the new corporation for significantly less money than the public would later pay. And the underwriter then guided the release of the newly formed company into the marketplace with an initial public offering. And this caused yet another wave of capital to pour into the new company from the public. And they now had plenty of capital to complete the development of Jack's newest technology, and everyone's stocks increased significantly in value. So after a statutorily required amount of time passed, and all of the initial investors were able to sell a small amount of their stocks, their securities eventually realizing a substantial profit. So what I want you to do is think about that and then join me next week where we will discuss another business issue. Call me at 213-718-3468. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.